sit and listen. It's not like the old days anymore. I could go on and on and on. And by what I did, didn't I? When Nick very kindly asked me to contribute to tonight's event, he said, Charles, I just want you to be yourself, just be you. Put it up front, the main message, get it across, straight between the eyes. And I said, right, fine, I will do so. So, fellow Liberal Democrats, answer me. Are you ready to win? Yes! So far, so good. That was the correct answer. Nick, you and I have been promising each other that curry for months. I think everybody's in broad agreement, so thanks very much. Now, the other function that I must perform, wait till you hear this one, is that I have to bring to you a message directed solely at Liberal Democrat voters and would-be voters from the chairman of the Conservative Party, one Mr. Eric Pickles himself. I am not making this up. This statement was issued by the chairman of the Conservative Party yesterday afternoon. You might have seen it reported in the national press today. In fact, I was sitting at home this morning. I was flabbergasted when I saw the statement coming out in the Press Association wires yesterday afternoon. And I was amused, and I read the press coverage of it today. And I was sitting at home this morning looking at one of the newspapers, and there's a photograph of Eric, and there's the statement reproduced, the message to the Liberal Democrats, and my 4-year-old son comes up, and he looks, and he said, who's that now? And I said, that is a very important man. I said, that man is called Mr. Eric Pickles, and he is the chairman of the Conservative Party board. He said, no, it's not. I said, yes, it is. No, it's not. And I said, well, who do you think it is then, Donald? He said, it's the big fat controller. And you know, I looked at that photograph again, through the eyes of a child, and I thought, this boy is really quite politically perceptive. I don't know where he got that from, but anyway, it's timed 12:41. This is a press copy from Gallery News at the House of Commons, and it's entitled, In a Simple Message. Well, with Eric, you wouldn't have expected anything less. Should that be anything more? This is what he said to all of you, Liberal Democrat voters. He said, quote, come on home to the Conservative Party. On the eve of the Liberal Democrat Conference, he said, quote, whether you are a Liberal Democrat who in the past voted Conservative, or someone who has never dreamed of voting Conservative before, there is a welcome awaiting you in our party. He went on, gets better. Liberal democracy has always formed an important part of the Conservative family. Is that the Adams family? I'm not making any of this up, it's all in quote. From the Factory Acts to 42 days detention, the Conservative Party will always be the home of progressive liberal democracy. Now, apart from hearing the sound of the clock striking 13, I'm thinking to myself that that, by any standard, seemed to be a rather potted version of Britannic Conservative and Unionist parliamentary history. I really almost keeled over when I came to the concluding sentence, which read as follows. It is time for people to come home to the Conservative Party. Presumably, unless your name this week happens to be Edward Macmillan Scott, and what was his crime It was, as a former Conservative leader, British Conservative leader in the European Parliament, returned earlier this year, as a distinguished member of that Parliament over many years, he had the audacity to stand for one of the vice presidential positions in the Parliament against a rather extreme right-wing nationalistic candidate from another country, and lo and behold, he got elected. And on that basis, the British Conservative Party didn't just withdraw the whip, they withdrew his membership. What kind of liberal democrat inclusiveness is that, Mr. Maybe, despite the veneer that Cameron has been trying to spray paint on that machine that he leads, they don't like winners, or maybe they just can't cope with people who've got consistent principles on big issues that they hold to when the weather's good and when the weather's not so good. People like Ted Heath, whom I used to enjoy the company of at Prime Minister's Questions. I shall never forget the afternoon when the French illegally, under Monsieur Jospin's socialist administration, banned the reimportation of British beef. William Hague, as the leader of the Conservatives, was onto this like a shot, dusting up Blair right round the dispatch box, one end of the chamber to the other. Oh my, how the Conservative Parliamentary Party, most of them loved it. And Hague's final sign-off, so much for the Prime Minister's much vaunted third way as far as his socialist pal in Paris, Mr. Jospin, is concerned. It's not so much the third way, it's more a case of two fingers. And sat down to great cheers from the parliamentary Tory party, apart from the Sphinx sitting immediately beside me, who at this point moved. And when Ted twitches, you feel it. If and he looked at me balefully and looked at Hague, and he just muttered in a stage whisper, "Such a vulgar little man." You can judge what a party is likely to turn out like if it ever gets into government by the way it behaves in opposition. And in opposition, not just do the leadership of this Conservative Party not have room for pro-Europeans who have served them at the top and with distinction and command support numerically and politically across the party divide within the European Parliament. No room for them, no indeed. But they have in fact, by the recklessness and stupidity of the decision since June, isolated their own members of Parliament in Europe into a parliamentary cul-de-sac. If that's what the Tories can do in opposition to our European interests, God help this country if they were ever in government. Judge parties by what they say about policy beyond these shores. You judge them by what they would do with domestic social policies at home as well. And here it's not Mr. Hague, but Mr. Osborne that comes into focus. Let not the British people rue for the weeks and months after the next election, if a Tory majority government was to be returned. Let them not rue and look back in anger at what this Osborne would be delivering for them in terms of public policy. Because all this talk about cuts, and we're part of this debate in a very upfront way, all this talk about cuts, in fact, is manna to heaven, to Cameron and his cohorts. Why so? Because it allows them now, you see, to present as some kind of public virtue, a sense of service, or in fact their true instincts as Tories born to rule would have led them to try and get to by means of public stealth. People have got to be aware of that. And when we talk, as we will this week, in that upfront way, about the challenges and the problems facing us, it's not about a meanness of spirit that's motivating us. In fact, in tough times, where liberal democracy is concerned, it's about a determination to tell it to people straight as it is, because people are not daft. They've got family and household budgets to run themselves, and they know that the running of the country is not fundamentally different. But they do know with us that if you tell the tough news straight, then there is much more chance that the generosity of spirit, which defines the Liberal Democrat mindset in politics, will still be there for those who fall victim of a go-getter society and actually wake up one day and find that they've got nowhere to go and precious little to get. There's got to be room in a movement and in the morality of politics for a heart as well as a head. I always felt that the definition of a good society is one that offers opportunity and optimism for young people and dignity and security for those at the other end of the age spectrum. And as we go through all our policies in the run-up to the election, let us be quite clear. We know where the pulse of this party lies. Whatever shape or form the manifesto commitments take, we will be doing everything possible, I'm sure, to prevent further hardship for present and potential students and further difficulties for present and future pensioners. We know the Conservatives in opposition, we've got a real case to take to the government, to this Labour government, exhausted, burnt out and bereft. Gordon Brown, you know, strikes me as Franco on his deathbed. If you recall, Franco was a long, long time a dying, and his death was often predicted that it never came about. The poor man lay enfeebled, mainly in a coma, but he would not expire. And the word went out from the clinicians, and an enormous crowd gathered outside the presidential palace. This time was really it. The great man was about to go. One of his daughters was in the bedroom, and he'd been comatose for weeks. Not a sound, not an utterance. And a noise came through, a voice out in this vast crowd, somehow just penetrated. And suddenly there was a flicker of recognition from this near corpse. And he stirred. And he said, "What was that noise?" And his daughter, understandably upset, said, "It's the sound of the Spanish people, Papa. They've come to say goodbye." And Franco thought about this. And he said, "But where are they all going?" And this really is Gordon Brown and his finish. Now, when I was first elected in 1983, the Alliance in those days came tantalisingly close to overtaking Labour in the share of the popular vote. We were within 1 percentage point. Look at where we are 26 years later, in terms of the number of MPs, parliamentarians at all levels, the great cities that we administrate and run, the fact that we've now had Liberal Democrat government ministers at work and with a legacy to point to, and the experience that comes with it in Scotland and Wales. That is where we're starting from. And that is why Nick Clegg was so correct and so inspiring this week when he said that as well as taking on the Conservatives, we're going to take the fight to Labour in their heartland, and we can beat them. So, and the press and our detractors and occasional critics who say we can't fight on two fronts, Labour in the north, Conservative in the south. Oh yes, we can. We've been doing it for several general elections. And in Scotland and Wales, we've been fighting on three fronts and coming through successfully with growing building success. We can do that again. And as we move away from this extraordinary year of the politics of protest into next year, the politics of choice, the Liberal Democrat message of liberty for all, north or south, irrespective of income, irrespective of where you come from, where you can be helped to get to. That's the liberty that we put on offer that is philosophically and politically unique. Ben Jonson put it well in Elizabethan times, in inviting a friend to supper. Nor shall our cups make any guilty men, but at our parting we shall be as when we innocently met. No simple word uttered or our mirthful word shall destroy nor affright the liberty that we enjoy this night. And thank you for allowing me to share.